Well, hello, book enthusiasts out there. I am so happy to bring you the enormously talented and witty Alex George, the author of The Paris Hours, which was released in May, and owner of Skylark Bookshop in Missouri. So I just wanted to say thank you, Alex, for being here, especially on Labor Day weekend. A writer's work is never done, correct?
That is true. There's always something to do. Absolutely. Yeah.
But
It's
we're
good to
so
be here.
grateful to have you with us.
Yeah, of course.
Well, and I have so many fun things I want to ask you about. But first, I was hoping that you would be so kind just to give a brief synopsis or teaser of the Paris Hours, because how lucky are we to have it straight from the author to the viewer? So we would love to hear just kind of a teaser for maybe some people out there who haven't read the Paris Hours yet.
Sure. So the Paris Hours takes place over the course of one hot summer's day in 1927 in Paris. The title is a bit of a giveaway. And it really features, there are four different stories that sort of take place over the course of this day. And although the stories interconnect and sort of cross pollinate with each other, each one features one main character. And there is an impoverished painter called Guillaume, who is on the run from some thugs to whom he owes money, and is struggling with some unrequited love. There is a writer called Jean Paul, who's a journalist, and he tells other people's stories because he has a story of his own, but it's almost too sad to tell. Then there is a puppeteer called Soren, who is an Armenian. He's a refugee from the Armenian genocide. And he spends his days performing puppet shows for the Parisian children in the public parks there, but he performs them in Armenian rather than in French. And finally, there is Camille, who is the maid of the writer Marcel Proust. And the story really began with her because I was doing some research and reading about Proust, and Proust's real life maid, who was called Celeste Alberet, wrote a book about her time with him, and she told this story about when he asked her to burn 32 of his notebooks, and which she did, and she burned all of them. But one of the things about being a novelist is that you're always asking, well, what if,
Yeah.
and so
Where's
my
the
little
story in this?
right, and so my little spidey sense was going, oh, and I thought, well, what if she didn't burn them all, and perhaps she kept one for herself? And then I thought, oh, and what if there was a secret in that notebook that everybody thought had been destroyed but wasn't? And so the whole story really began there.
With Camille.
Yes.
Yes. Um, and I know that because your book tour got canceled, obviously with the pandemic and everything, you've done quite a few of these virtual book chats and interviews where you kind of talked about the Paris Hours and the books. And I think I've seen at least 4 or 5 of them. I know you've had to do your
Oh,
own.
have you? Oh, my
What
commiserations.
they're
How
wonderful. No, they're
awful.
wonderful. Because what I was going to say is I think it's so wonderful because every one you watch, you find out like a new interesting tidbit and behind the scenes
Interesting.
background on the book and its background insights into your writing process. So I feel like you pick up these little nuggets with each interview. So I'm hoping that I know you've done your fair share. So I'm hoping that today I can bring our viewers some kind of unmined, unknown little book gems that maybe they haven't heard about you or the Paris Hours or your writing process. So, kind of first, I thought I'd ask, is there any questions that or book topics that you're surprised that somebody hasn't asked you yet or you wish they would have asked you about? And if not, what has been kind of your favorite question or point of discussion you've talked about with the Paris Hours?
Oh, that's such an interesting question. Well, that one right there is there's you're right. We do writers do a lot of these things, and I always worry that I become I sort of give the same answers, and I can hear myself sort of, oh, I've been here before, haven't I? This is
But you don't know who's new and who's watched the
right.
previous
And
ones, and you want to
so
cover everything.
yeah, so that can be difficult. But um, and you can always tell, at some point during this process when a writer has been asked a question that they haven't been asked before, because their face sort of lights up
You're like, oh,
in,
something new.
in joy and delight, and it's like, really, wow. Uh, and I'm just trying to think, but there hasn't been a question that I have been wanted to be asked. I think that was what you asked me, that I haven't been
Surprised that somebody hasn't asked about a certain, topic or something about a character that you're like, wow, I can't believe nobody has brought that up.
Not really. No, I mean,
Okay.
people, people, I mean, and it's very, flattering that people have read the book closely, and they've,
Yeah.
they pay attention, which is
Right.
right. It's always nice. Um, so no, not really. It's never this, people always sort of have their own view on things and their own perspective and their own take when they ask the questions. But there hasn't been one that I've been going, why has nobody asked me about this thing?
Yeah.
But yeah, and the questions, I don't know. I mean, a lot of people ask sort of similar kinds of things, but it's always a bit different. But the one question that I was asked, what is it, Saturday? So it was earlier this week, and someone said to me, "So, what do you hope that your readers take away from the book?"
The takeaway. Yes.
Yeah, and I'll be honest, that sort of stumped me a little bit, because I don't tend to think in those terms. I think my job as a novelist is just to tell the best story I can tell.
Well, and
And
depending on who's reading the book too, everybody might have a different takeaway based on their background, their lives, their experiences.
absolutely, I always say, and you're so right, Aaron, because a book is, and this is going to sound a little weird, but bear with me with this one.
Okay.
I always say a book is a little bit like a kiss, in that it
Okay.
requires two people to do it properly.
Right.
And without a reader, there's only half a story there. You need the reader to read it and to open the pages and read the words. And exactly as you said, that's so smart. Every reader brings their own experiences and sensibilities to the page, and people have reacted in very different ways to this novel,
Oh, yeah.
and particularly the ending, and and
Me.
that's because everyone has a different viewpoint, a different way of thinking about things, and that's part of the pleasure of the whole thing. Is it's very humbling as a writer, just to realize that, yeah, okay, I wrote the book, but it doesn't mean anything until it gets into people's hands, and they start to read it. So yeah, it's you're right though, but everyone brings something different. There's a wonderful book whose name I'm not going to be able to remember, but it was written by a guy he's a graphic artist, and I think he designs book covers, and he was writing about the visual aspects of it, and he said, if I write "there was a river," then absolutely everybody who reads that sentence is going to be thinking of a different river.
That's true.
I might be thinking of the River Thames because I'm English, or a little stream in the countryside, where somebody else might be thinking of the Mississippi or the Missouri. So and there's so much scope. There's so much work really for the reader to do. To take these words and actually turn them into a narrative. So it's really, I love all that. It's very interesting.
So, what was your answer on Saturday?
Um, so my son's cat is meowing in the background.
That's okay. He likes your answers.
Hello. The cat's name, rather confusingly, is Hank. So if I, but she's a she. But
Oh, that's hilarious.
yeah, hi Hank. So I think I talked a little bit about. I mean, I sort of hummed and hawed and
Yeah.
hedged and said, "Well, I don't really know if there's a bit," but I said something about connectivity and how we're all connected in some way, even if we don't perhaps always know that we are, and how one person's actions can inadvertently trigger, an infinite number of different responses, and consequences elsewhere. It's something like that.
That's great. No, I mean, I see that completely because, yeah, they all end up, well, I don't want to give away too much, but yeah, they all connect in various
Mhm,
ways. But
mhm.
and back what you were saying a minute ago about with the river and whatnot, it's kind of like when books are turned into movies and everybody
Oh
kind of
yeah.
has in their head little images and pictures of what they think the characters look like or scenes in the book. And so sometimes when a book gets turned into a movie, some people love it, some people hate it, because some people are like, that's totally not who I saw as that person,
Right.
or vice versa. Some people, like myself, I'm not always good about, if I've seen the movie, reading the book after, because now I already have a
Hmm.
preconceived notion of what these characters look like. I'd always rather read the book first
Always read the
and
book
then watch
first,
the movie, because I'm
for
afraid that
sure.
they're gonna. Now I have a picture in my head of who they've already narrowed it down for me.
Right, right. And it's interesting because I've spoken to a lot of writers who, and some people very deliberately don't even describe the physical attributes
Oh,
of
interesting.
and in fact I'm not sure that I did really in this book, because I wanted to. I mean, I know there are various points when I sort of talk about, that Soren is like a big man, but I tend not to do too much physical description of characters, certainly the main characters in the book, because I want the reader to inhabit it fully, and sort of supply their own,
Right.
their own picture in their head.
So have you, now that you've been asked that question, did you go back to your wife or some family members or friends and say, what was your guys' takeaway? And were you surprised, if you did ask that, were you surprised by anybody's answers? Or have you ever had any takeaways from books that you were like, whoa, that's totally not where I was going with that. That's weird.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't ask because, I mean, as sort of my sort of, before I gave that answer about connectivity, I said, sort of what I began saying, which is all I'm really interested in is telling the best story I can and moving people. There's the famous line by E.M. Forster, only connect. And I think that's what my job as a writer is to connect with people and to move them in some way, whether it's making them laugh or making them cry or making them angry, whatever. And just telling the best. Don't eat the chocolate. Just telling them the best story that I can. And so that for me is the sort of, that's the standard which I hold myself to. It's like, how good is the story, and is it compelling, and do people, are they turning the pages? I'm not in the I'm not that interested in sort of writing polemics, and sort of writing things that people are going to walk away feeling that necessarily. I hope that people learn some stuff from this book. I mean, there's quite a lot of interesting information in there about, about Paris at that time and things like that. But it certainly wasn't my intention to uh, lecture anybody.
Right. Be
So
so deep on a tertiary even level.
right. But there have been times in the past with earlier books when people have said to me, "So I really like this because you were doing that thing, right?" And I've just gone, "I,
Yeah,
I
I just was wondering.
was, yeah." But again, it goes back to what I was saying about the reader and the reader's role in all of this. And even if, and it is not uncommon for people to say things and make assumptions or tell me what I was doing, which, and they're wrong. On a sort of factual level, and that no, that wasn't what I was doing, or I didn't mean to do it. But that absolutely doesn't mean that that is not a 100% legitimate point of view,
Yeah.
because every reader has full ownership of those words once they're in their hands. So if somebody feels that they read this and they thought it was X or Y, then okay, that's absolutely fine. And people, it's like, people see things in art in all sorts of different ways, and they interpret it in different ways, which perhaps the creator hadn't intended. But that makes it, if to my mind, almost more interesting, because
Right.
it shows you all of these things that were sort of out there somewhere, but maybe not articulated sort of in any kind of positive way, or actual. It was also subliminal. So yeah, I think that's what I love hearing, sort of what people thought about the book, and their takeaways, because they're more interesting and more valid than mine in a way. Because, yeah, no, but really, because I just wrote it, and like I
Right.
say, the circle is not complete until somebody picks it up and reads it.
And it's kind of like back when we all were like in English lit class and sometimes the teacher would constantly hammer on what's the symbolism of this and what was maybe the archetype, and but you just want to say maybe it was just that. Why does it always have to have double, triple
Right.
symbolism, archetype beyond that, you know? So yeah, sometimes maybe you were just saying that.
Right. Right.
But speaking on the connectivity that you were talking about, how important in these times has art become, you know, the connection when people aren't, you know, we're sheltering in place, we're staying at home, we're not getting to connect with others like we used to, and connect, um, travel and things like that. And so here you're providing this connectivity in this time of the pandemic, with your book, and with these virtual chats, and you're reaching people you might not have ever got to reach
Sure.
before or talk
Mhm.
with. So I fully agree with that connectivity point of view that you just brought up.
Yeah, and it's interesting. And you mentioned the pandemic. I mean, the other thing that has happened is that people have written to me and they've said, we were going to go to Paris for our trip of a lifetime this summer, and we can't go, but we got your book instead.
And you were like, so my book's a substitute for Paris. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, and it's been very much. I mean, my reaction or instinct always is to apologize because no matter how good a book you think it is, it's not the same as going to Paris, and I never would
Right.
pretend that it was. So yeah, I write back to these people and say, well, I hope you finally get to go at some point.
Well, and because you have such a history and connection with Paris, because
Right.
you went to school there as a
Hmm.
teenager and you
Hmm.
worked there for a short time as attorney. So I was curious on that note. Were there any favorites of Paris that you kind of slipped in the novel? Because I know you tried to kind of steer clear of some of the stereotypical
Yeah.
Paris things that we all think of. So,
Yeah, I mean, I did. I mean, there are certain streets that I'm very fond of, and things like that, and a lot of the book is set around the left bank, by Odeon, which is where I used to live when I was 25 years old and didn't realize how lucky I was
I,
to be there. I look back now and just think, oh, those are the days. At least fancy free. Um, so yeah, I mean, I deliberately sort of, when I was playing around with it and sort of trying to work out where people went, I you know, and I mean, I didn't know all of the places, but I knew most of them, and I had sort of Google Maps of Paris that was on my bookmark, and I was looking at that all the time and going, so if you walk down that street and then turn left,
right.
all these things, um, but there were certain things. So, for example, the episode where the church is bombed on Easter Sunday, or Easter, it was Good Friday actually, in 1918. So that church is still there, of course. And I looked online. I hadn't been there, but there was a particular question I had about whether there was a door in the back of the church,
Oh, were they
and
out? Yeah.
yeah, and I was just looking and looking online for this information. I couldn't find it anywhere. So I was actually there last summer with my children, and so I dragged them to this. No, it wasn't last summer. This must have been the time before because the book was already done by then. But the time before, and actually went and sort of walked around the back of the church. Went, aha, okay, there's a door, so I can.
Oh, wow.
On we go. So yeah, so I've been back. During the writing of the book, it was fun to go back and sort of confirm things or verify things, and yeah, that was fun too.
That's awesome. Because I know you did do a lot of extensive research behind the
Mm.
Paris Hours. So I was hoping we could delve into that a little bit
Mm.
more, because I know you've talked in the past about when you do that much research, how important it is to know what to leave out. So I was curious, were there any really interesting bits that you really wished you could have put in, or had to leave out because of like lack of space or editorial revisions? You know, was there anything missing that you wish could have gone in?
No, there wasn't actually. I was lucky in that respect. I mean, I was able to. I mean, there was a lot of stuff I left out, of course, but those decisions were all mine, and and there was actually, during the course of the writing and then the rewriting, stuff actually went back in again because I thought, well, I need to beef this up a little bit, or talk about this a little bit more. Um, but yes, you're right. I mean, and I've said many times, the art of research is to wear it lightly.
Yeah.
And just because I read about, I mean, in one of my earlier books, I read a lot about corn yields in Missouri in 1930s, and I did that just so that the reader didn't have to.
Yeah.
So it's like, and I always look at research as I look at it as in this sort of defensive mode, and I don't want to get anything wrong. So I always do enough research to make sure that the facts as the facts in the real world mirror, or at least will sort of fix again with whatever story I'm telling. And so I just want to make sure I don't get anything wrong more than anything else. But there was also, because of the genesis of this book, there was a ton of stuff that I read about that I thought I was going to write about and then didn't, just because the shift of my focus in terms of what I was going to write changed. But that was all fine. I mean, it was still all good to know, and I didn't. There was nothing I regretted leaving out. Which isn't always the case. There are times when, yeah, your editor very well may go, well, you may find this fascinating, but guess what?
The general public, not so much.
Yeah, it slows the narrative down, or you're going to confuse people, or it's just not relevant. So cut it. But no, happily, all of those decisions were
Oh, that's
mine.
good. Yeah. Like you said, at least you have the control in that aspect.
Right, right.
Well, and back to what you just said a minute ago, I was going to ask you about that. I know that your original premise was different, so I was curious, in the beginning with your premise, you did research a lot more interesting creatives than the ones that you included. I mean,
Mhm.
obviously, you included some great historical figures and infamous celebrities like Ernest Hemingway and Marcel Proust and Josephine Baker, and Sylvia Beach. But obviously, I know you researched a lot more than that. So how did you decide who to pair it, who made the cut, who paired down to these cameos that you were going to do? Like, was it who matched up and paired the best with those four protagonists that you could connect them with, or how did you narrow it
Oh,
down to those specific ones?
okay. So there's a question I haven't been asked before. So that was good. That's so interesting. I wish I could tell you that it was as considered and as scientific as that, Erin, but it kind of wasn't. I mean, I think it was. I mean, partly it was just like knowing where they were. So it was a geographical thing, partly because you mentioned Sylvia Beach, who was the owner of Shakespeare and Company, who was just, I mentioned Odeon before in the sixth arrondissement. That was where she was, and so it made sense for her to appear. And also because she was an American living in Paris, and Jean Paul is writing about Americans, so
That's
it would have
true.
been a magnet for those expatriates to go there. So there was a degree, but it all just, I guess, it all just flowed naturally. I didn't feel that I had to make any decisions particularly about, sorry, you're not kind of come in, you can come in.
Yeah.
It was all just very natural, and
You
and
didn't
I
have to be the
felt like,
gatekeeper.
yeah, right. And I wanted to write about. I mean, I love writing about music in all of my books, and I wanted to write about Ravel, and so he was a natural one. And he's got such an interesting story because not only was he this extraordinary composer of just beautiful, beautiful music, but he drove an ambulance in World War I, and he actually wanted to be a pilot, but he was too old and blind to do that,
Oh,
so
wow.
he did this instead. And so all of these little things. So they kind of chose themselves, I guess, is what is the but and it sounds to me as if you've you've heard me witter on about this stuff. So originally, I was going to write about Serge Diaghilev, and he was going to be the sort of the axis around which all of this story uh, circulated, and he went.
Right.
And so once he went, then it was sort of a lot of the things, a lot of those people just sort of fell
Yeah,
away.
place. Yeah.
Um, but also the other calculus that you have to make whenever you write about Paris is, people when people think about Paris, they think about Ernest Hemingway, because A
Yeah.
Movable Feast is obviously part of the canon, and Gertrude Stein as well. And so and I tried to get a mixture of sort of obvious ones and then slightly less obvious ones, like Sylvia Beach and maybe Sidney Bechet wasn't quite so well known unless you're a jazz freak like I am. So, but it wasn't something that I fretted over. It just, as I say, they kind of chose themselves.
Well, and with some of those characters, they're so famous. There must be such a multitude of books about them out there. How do you select? I know you've said you try to read at least one or two thick biographies
Mhm.
on each one. How do you select which ones are your research mine for these characters when there's so many out there, so much research and books and papers and articles on these people?
I mean, you can't read it all.
Yeah,
You could spend I could spend years reading about any one of those characters without writing a word.
right.
Um, I mean, it's not. It's fairly easy to work out which are the good ones. So I mean,
Yeah.
and social media is a wonderful thing. I think I put something on either Facebook or Twitter about which is the best Proust biography,
Oh, so yeah,
and
you
I got
follow
several.
that.
Yeah, and I got several different answers back. But there was one in particular that came sort of to the top of the pile. I actually read 4 or 5 books about Proust, um, but that so you can just do it that way. And very often when you read, and with Hemingway, I mean, yeah, there are countless books, but they're all they all touch on the same things,
Yes.
and
And
when you're looking at a particular time, this is why libraries are wonderful. You just go and you can pull this sort of 700-page biography out. You're actually only interested in about 30 or 40
yeah.
pages, because and that's a relief as well because it can be a bit much. Um, so yeah, that was kind of how I did it, and just and it very unscientific. And there are certain characters who there's just less written about them, as well. So your options aren't quite as sort of mind-boggling.
Well, and what does it feel like when you do like that amount of research and sometimes it ends up in being kind of a sporadic sentence or descriptive adjective here and there about a character, albeit it may be so important um, about that character, but it might just be a sentence here and there. I'm just thinking of certain parts in your book where maybe there was just this one sentence about Proust where it's a magnitude of a sentence, but you had to probably do so much research to get those adjectives. So how does it feel to do that much research and then it just ends up as this one sentence, even if it's so important?
I mean, that's kind of the job, you
Yeah,
just you got to do it. And I always sort of what I try and do with the research is to, I read these books and I've got my yellow highlighter, not here, but I have a trusty yellow, and go through. And but then what I do is I put the books away, and I try and sort of by osmosis hope that they sort of somehow get into
yeah.
my head.
What are the
Um,
things that rise to the top or stay with you, maybe?
Yeah, well, and I think that's an interesting way of putting it, because yeah, those things that stick with me, and another person's, they're going to be different
Yeah,
things, and those are what I sort of bring in to the story when I'm trying to create these characters. And my what I want to do is to, obviously, I have a voice, an authorial voice that I want and need to use, but I also want to the best of my ability anyway, sort of honor their histories and existences and stories. And so, I felt that reading as much as I read, for example, about Proust or Hemingway or Gertrude Stein or any of these people, I at least was able to make, I hope, a fair approximation of, sort of how they talked and all of those sorts of things. So, but I mean, who knows? It's because you're making it up.
yeah.
I so I try and, as I said, to ingest it all and then just like write and just see how it looks on the page. And that was kind of how I did it. Everyone has a different way of doing
Right.
it, but
And you're
that's
like, and that's why I do historical fiction versus history. So I do have this wiggle room to.
right, right. And it's interesting. I'm actually talking with Christina Baker Klein next Wednesday, about her new novel, The Exiles, which is
Yes,
wonderful, by the
I've
way.
heard of that one.
It's so good. And we've talked in the past about I have this theory that all historical novelists exist on a spectrum of obsession when it comes to fact as opposed to fiction. And some people really don't care whether the story they tell has any bearing. In fact, and there are other people who are obsessed that
Like
every
juice.
last detail has to be right. And everyone falls on somewhere on the scale. And I think of course, I would say this, wouldn't I? I think I'm somewhere in the middle,
Yeah.
um, and that I want to get things right. But I always say that what I try and do is to look for the lacunae and to where the holes are, and then that's where I do my work. And I can go in. So, for example, there's that scene in Shakespeare and Company with Sylvia Beach and Gertrude Stein and Ernest Hemingway. And when I first wrote this scene, they it looked rather different. And Hemingway and Gertrude Stein were much friendlier towards each other, and there was this sort of jokey banter. And then I sort of went back and realized that by then, the two of them were at loggerheads pretty much all the time.
Falling out.
Because they adored each other for a while, but then I think two monstrous egos, and just
Yeah.
after a while they just couldn't. There's too much, and so I went back and sort of and just made the dialogue a little spikier and a little sharper, which just felt right to me. Now, obviously, that conversation never
Yeah.
happened. I made it up, but it's
Right.
all I can do in that context is to make it as real as it can be. And so that's when I talk about working in the spaces. That's what I'm talking about. And it could have happened.
Right. You never know. You don't know what arguments there was.
Right.
So I know your book probably existed in many different formats and versions through different revisions and drafts and
Mhm.
edits from editors until it became the final copy that everyone sees on the shelves. So I was curious because you had mentioned and brought up the ending earlier. Was there ever any different ending than the one we see? Because I don't want to give too many spoilers about the ending, even though I would love to talk about it. But was there ever a different ending or a character conclusion different than what ended up in the final draft?
Okay, big fat yes to that. To the point where, so I need to give you a little bit of history here. So I've published 7 books. I've published 3 in the States, and the first 2 were published by Penguin. And my editor there was an amazing editor. His name is Amy Einhorn, who had her own imprint at Penguin called Amy Einhorn Books. And the first book that she published there was The Help by
Oh,
by Catherine Stockett.
yeah.
So so basically, so she's a bit of a rock star, and
Right.
everyone always paid attention to everything that Amy did.
Yeah.
And so she published my first 2 books. There was A Good American and then Setting Free the Kites. And then she left to go to Macmillan to Flatiron Books. And and then she bought uh, uh, the Paris Hours. So I moved from Penguin to Macmillan because I wanted to work with Amy again. And one of the things about Amy is that she is known in the industry for being a real editor, in that she rolls up her sleeves and says, "Okay, I really like this book, but it's so right now it's an A, but I want to make it an A
A
plus.
plus.
I want to take it to the stratosphere." And so, and she will. I mean, I remember when I worked with her on A Good American, we had a 3-hour phone call, and then I got a 9-page single space letter from her listing everything that we had talked about and all of the work that I had to
You're
do.
like, oh, here we go.
Yeah. But that's, people don't do that anymore, Aaron. I mean, a lot of editors now, they acquire and they publish, but they don't get their hands dirty in the text and the nitty gritty of the text. And she did, to just an astonishing degree, for somebody who was, very senior and very
Right.
well regarded, and she still does it. And God bless her for it. And that's why I wanted to move and work with her again, because
Because it
she
takes good to brilliant.
Yeah, and well, I mean, that's a matter of opinion, but it certainly makes it better. Let's put it that way. And I loved working here with my first two books, and I wanted to do it again. So anyway, so that's all by way of background. And so she bought the book, and it was at the beginning of January, and then that later on that month, I was just in the process of trying to work out if I was going to open this bookshop. And so I went with my business partner to Memphis to the what's called the ABA Winter Institute. So that's the American Booksellers Association Winter Institute, and authors go, and booksellers go, and editors go, and publicity people go, and blah blah. It's a great hoopla, and it was very funny because I went and people were very confused when they saw me because they were going, "What are you doing here?
Yeah.
You have a book coming out." And I was going, "No, I've got a different hat."
Yeah.
Uh, anyway, so Amy was there, and so we had just sold the book to her, and we sat down, and so rather than having a 3-hour conversation on the telephone, we actually sat down and had a multiple-hour conversation about the book. And at one point, she said to me, and here's where we're going to circumlocute a little bit because we don't want to give anything away.
Right. Right.
So let me see if I can do this. She said, "So I wonder whether you could do this." And I thought, oh, that's funny. She's got these two characters confused. And I said, no, you got those two characters confused. And she said, no, I haven't. And I said, no, you have. And she said, no, I haven't. And I thought about it. And then this great big light bulb went off on top of my head. And I went, oh, okay, we can do that. Um, and so this is there's if people haven't watched that, there's a big twist at the end of the book, which and that was entirely her. And then all I had to do was to go back
and try to figure out how to connect it to that ending.
right, and so that was 9 months of work because I had to basically go back in and reverse engineer this entire thing. But it was such a good, strong idea. So yes, or I can't remember whether,
Wow.
or no, depending upon what the question was, but there was a huge change. It wasn't always the
Wow.
same. And and I didn't even remember what the ending was to begin with.
Oh,
But
I was like, you're gonna have to tell me later.
but no, so that was yeah, that was fun.
And
But
didn't she also come up with the final title, The Paris Hours?
no, not for this one.
Oh, okay. I
Not
thought
for this. No, I'm actually going to take all the credit for this one. She came up with the title for my first book, A Good American.
Oh, gotcha.
Um, but no, this one was me.
It's all you.
Unusually, I'm notoriously bad at titles, but this one I managed. So
What were some of the okay, so then if you came up with this one, what were some of the titles, like pre-titles before you finally settled on the Paris Hours? Do you remember any of them?
um, no, I mean with no, I don't. No, I don't. I mean, there were
This must be the best one.
one of them was I think when we sold it, it was called One Day in Paris.
Oh,
You know,
okay.
which is sort of like it does what it says on the tin.
Yeah.
But it was not very inspired. But I mean, it was hard coming up with a title because and titles are incredibly hard anyway. And we did. My wife and I tried this. We sort of tried to do it by committee. So we had some of our closest friends over, and we cooked them um, Mexican pork belly, and uh, various Mexican delicacies, and then plied them with margaritas, and then just sort of got them to talk, and that didn't really help, unfortunately. So,
Oh.
that's how desperate we were. We just thought, I thought, well, I'll tell you roughly what it's about, and then just tell me what
What's
ideas
the
and
first that
thoughts that
pops in
come
your
out of you.
mind? The
Yeah, yeah,
best ideas always happen like one or two margaritas
yeah,
in.
absolutely, always, but not on that occasion. But yeah, and I like the title. It's good, but these things are always incredibly painful to come up. Well, for me
Because you're like,
anyway.
how do I sum up years years of research, writing, and all that story in like a phrase? How does that?
Right. Right, and you want something that's sort of compelling and interesting, and is going to make people pick it up. Um, yeah, and it was hard, but and having the word Paris in the title, so that in and of itself was a huge debate, because some people were going, "Oh, well, you should never have Paris in the title," and then other people were going, "Always put Paris in the title." Because it will, and there are people who go, well, I'll pick up anything that has Paris in the title, and other people go, I won't even look at it. So it's hard,
You got to go with your gut then, because you can't make everybody happy.
right. There are multiple points of view, and but the thing about having Paris in the title was it gave us more license when it came to the cover,
Yeah, true.
of being able to do other things. And Macmillan, one of the things that they do, which I really loved, was that they sent me this long questionnaire about covers, and they sort of asked me about my earlier covers and what I liked and what I didn't like, and what were my thoughts about this cover, and blah 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 blah, which I really appreciated, being asked for that feedback, and what
Was
my
that the first
response.
time you had gotten like to that degree of being able to put that much feedback and input into the cover?
Yeah, it's certainly that early on in the process, because it was very early on, and but the essence of my response was, please don't put the Eiffel Tower on the cover of my.
Yeah, I have one.
That
One
was
deal
really
breaker.
right. That was really what it boiled down to, and it was funny because they had a lot of fun with me, because they kept doing that, and they kept they there was one time they sent
Can
me.
we break Alex George?
Yeah, it was like, we're gonna get him. And they at one point, it went so far that they have these internal page proofs that they give you to, so what the book actually looks like on the page, in terms of how it's typeset and all of these
Oh
things.
wow.
And they put little icons of the Eiffel
On
Tower
every
on
page.
every page at the top, either side of the page number. And I can even now just imagine them giggling to themselves as
Well,
they
and then you're
went.
like new to this publishing company. It's your first book with them. So you're like, how can I say this and still stay in good
Yeah,
graces? Like, don't you dare.
yeah. I know. I think I was. It was being hazed. Like, let's get the new guy. But anyway, none of that happened. And as I said to them, because Paris is in the title, it's doing all the work for you, so we can
We
we can
already know about that. Yeah.
yeah, it is bad. So we can focus on some other thing. And I love
I do too.
the cover, and
Gorgeous.
it's lovely, and it's always nerve wracking though when you when you get that email, and the emails are the cover email, and they're always the same, and it always goes, "Dear Alex, well, we're so excited finally to share this with you. We are all thrilled, and we can't wait to see what you think." And then blah, blah, blah. And then
Right.
at the bottom of this email, there's a little file with a JPEG thing. And
Like,
you,
please let me like it. Please let me.
yeah, and you click on it, and you sort of go, and then you going, "Mm." But on this particular occasion, it happened. I was driving my son to Boston. He's at Berklee College of Music, and he was going back for his second year. This was last summer, and we had just stopped. We were driving through New York, and we had just stopped for lunch. Got back in the car, and then this email came in. And we were in a rental car, so, and he's like, not all. So I was driving. I could not. I had to do all the driving, and I saw it was like, oh no, it's the cover email.
Am I ready at this moment?
And well, and I had 4 hours before we were stopping again.
Oh my
So
gosh.
I made the decision, like, I'm not going to look at it while I'm driving, because
Yeah.
you need to sort of be fully present for this moment, because this is going to be something you're going to look at for a long time.
Right.
So I basically stared at my phone for 4 hours till we got to Massachusetts, and we stopped at my mother-in-law's, and so got out, got the phone, and then we looked at it, and it has not changed. I mean, that was the very first
Wow.
iteration, and it was so perfect. Um, doesn't always happen like that. With the book before, Setting Free the Kites, we sent the original design right back and said, this is absolutely unacceptable. You need to do something different. And then we had a whole thing and I was more involved at that point. So it doesn't always work.
Right.
People do, authors do sort of send things back, but this was just a dream. And I only realized sometime later that the image on the
Mm-hmm.
is of Maxime's, the very famous restaurant, and there's a very
Oh,
famous staircase in
wow.
Maxime's, and that's what that is. So
Oh, I did
it
not know
was,
that.
yeah,
So
perfect.
there is still Paris on the cover.
Yes, yes, but no Eiffel Tower. So
So how different is it since you have seen the cover and you know what it's going to look like? How different is it when you actually get that like as you already as you did on your social media website and most authors do, you do this, you get the
oh yeah.
boxes, you open the box, you pull out the book. So is it this to have this physical copy? Is it that, or is it, what is it like to do the cover versus getting this physical book? Or is that more kind of just like, hey world, look at my
So the thing about the cover is that when you see it for the first time, I mean, even if you love it, you're sort of second guessing yourself and you're going, well, do I really love it? Or am I just so relieved that it's not awful that I say I love it and I think I love it? So I've learned, because I've done this enough times now, that you have to give yourself 24 to 48 hours just to live with it and look at it and sort of, and finally work out what you really think. I mean, first reactions are obviously important, but they're actually, when you're the author, they're not as important, I don't think, because a little later. So so and there's always, as I say, there is a degree of apprehension in that sort of on the JPEG and seeing it for the first
yeah.
time, but there is nothing quite like opening that box for the first time and seeing your book as a galley with the cover and with the quotes and with the blurbs and all of those things, when for years and years and years it's just existed as a file on your laptop.
Right. Just on a screen.
Yeah, or I'm just looking for paper. You think I have some paper, but or a great big wad of paper, um,
Right.
but it's not a book. And so and there are certain people who that's really interesting. Oh, I'm going to work that into my. Sorry, because I'm just thinking about. I'm doing these interviews next week. I've
Yeah.
got Christina Baker Klein on Wednesday, and then Caroline Levitt on Thursday.
Wow,
And I
you've
might
got a
ask
week.
them which is the most exciting bit. Because for me, it's more exciting for me to get the galley than
The actual
to get
copy.
the final copy, because the
Oh, the
galley.
galley over even the final copy.
Oh yeah, because the galley is the first time
It's in
that
that
those
pack.
years of work looks like a book,
Yeah.
and that is a. I got goose. You can't. So I got goosebumps.
Think
That
about
is
when you saw
a.
it.
It's just amazing. It is. It is. It's like, oh, this is really going to happen again,
This
and
is
it
the tangible
never.
Alex George out into the world.
Yeah, it never gets old. That kind of that excitement. And I mean, one of the reasons I started writing was because as my job as a lawyer, I never made anything. I never created. I was like drafting documents and negotiating deals, and I was an M&A lawyer, corporate work, but there was nothing ever at the end of it. And to be able to hold up a book and go, huh, well, I made this.
Yeah.
This wasn't there before, and now it is. And so that the tangible element of it, that as an artifact, it's a thing. This is something I made, is really special. And yeah, and so for me, the galley is even better than the final version. That's so interesting. I wonder I don't know if I'm weird about that. I have to find out what other
So
people
that
think.
brings the point of, do you listen to audiobooks or read ebooks, or are you only like a physical book person over digital?
So I do not read ebooks.
Okay. I
I
kind of could
yeah,
tell based on your previous answer.
yeah. Yeah, and look, I have nothing against them. I think anything that gets more people reading
Yeah.
is good. I think ebooks are for the right person are wonderful. I don't even take them, when we go. I mean, on vac. Well, I kind of remember what vacations are. I don't know whether you do, but they're a thing we used to do back in the old days. Um, and I see the value of them, but I just don't like it. I spend all day looking at a screen anyway, so why would I want to look at another
Oh, true.
screen? But audiobooks, yes, absolutely. I just finished one this morning and have now begun another one. And I'm always listening to audiobooks. Um,
Do
and
you listen to your audiobooks ever?
well, I've listened to bits of them.
Okay.
So I've listened to so so with my first book, A Good American. This was actually before that. It was published in 2012, and back then people did it was more still sort of physical CDs rather
Oh, yeah.
than
Yeah.
sort of downloads and on your phone and stuff. And I did listen to the first CD of 9 or 12 or however many it was. Um, I'm slightly embarrassed to admit I actually fell asleep while I was listening to it, but I knew what was going to happen, so it was. But
True. Yeah.
it's very weird to listen to your words read by somebody else, um, and but really interesting because it shows you, and it kind of goes back to what I was saying about the reader and how the reader brings things to the book. um, because every actor who has done, they've been the three audiobooks, three different people, and they all bring their own interpretation to the words. And even though the words cannot change,
Right.
I listen to them and I go, "Huh, oh, interesting. Okay, you did that. Oh, and you slowed down here and you paused and the guy who did the audio for the Paris Hours is this guy called Raphael Corkel.
He was amazing.
He's amazing and just and brought such gusto to the
Oh,
thing and just such drama. And I didn't and I had sort of listened to him because they sort of send every publisher does it differently. With Penguin, they would send me MP3s and I would listen and sort of say which one sounded like the voice in my head,
right.
which was cool. And obviously the first two books both set in America, and so they were narrated by American actors. And Raphael is English, but he's
He's
clearly.
English.
Uh
I'm shocked.
huh.
He sounds French.
Well, he did. That was what I was going to say. He's clearly lived in France because his French accent was very good.
That's what I say. That's why I'm like, he's English?
Yeah,
He sounds so
yeah.
French.
Yeah, no, he's English, and but actors can do
Yeah.
all sorts of
Well, or
accents.
these
So
narrators who do like some audiobooks have multiple narrators
yeah,
for different characters, and then there's some that do all the characters. So you have a man doing a woman's voice of different
yep,
ages and man's voice of different ages, a child. Like it's
yeah,
insane what they can do.
yeah. No, it's amazing. I was just listening. I finished this audiobook this morning. It was called Big Sky by Kate Atkinson, and it's read by Jason Isaacs, who I believe was what was he called? Lucius Malfoy in
No.
the Harry Potter books.
Oh, that makes me want to listen to it right now.
Oh, it's really good, and he's got a English accent like this and very like,
Yeah.
but
Oh,
but
yeah.
a lot of the book is set in Yorkshire in northern England, and he does all of these wonderful northern accents,
Oh, wow.
and a Scottish and they're great, and he does all the voices, and yeah, it's a real skill. It's a
Wow.
real skill, and people often ask me, "So, are you going to do your own audiobook?" And it's like, not a no, no, absolutely not.
Not a
There are
chance.
many people who can do it infinitely better than me. So,
What do you think when people ask you to do readings?
well, readings are kind of going out of fashion a little bit now, I think. We certainly, at the bookstore, in the old days when we had events, people would only read. We would say, 5 minutes max,
Yeah.
because what people want is this. They want to have
Yeah.
they want to listen to the conversation. You can just pick up a book and read the book.
Yeah.
What you can't get is the stories behind the book, and all of that sort of conversation, and that's what people like. I also run a book festival called the Unbound Book Festival, and we have a similar approach there. We say, well, you can read for 2 minutes, but that's all. The days of, I remember when I lived in London, I'd go to readings, and somebody would stand up and read for 40 or 50 minutes.
Oh my
And
goodness. Yeah.
people's heads just go down. So it's, but having said that, I'm often asked to read a 2 minute section, and that's kind of fun.
How do you
But
pick the 2 minute section out of the whole? What do you pick that's 2 minutes that's going to give people the flavor and the pulse of this book?
I mean, that is a really good question, Aaron. And I mean, it's always hard, but it's particularly hard when you have four
Right.
distinct
Who do you pick?
narratives going through. The one I do the most is actually it's Jean Paul, and it's
Yeah.
the very first chapter when he's listening. He's in his apartment very early in the morning, listening to George Gershwin on the record player.
I wonder if
Um,
you picked that because of two reasons: because of the fascination with Americans and the music, because you love music. Is
yes,
that
yeah, it's just, and it's yeah, and you got to pick something, so that was kind of what
there's
I
no
did.
wrong answer, I guess.
But it's interesting though, and I've never worked out whether it's an art or a science, choosing that what to pick. And when I for my last book, I kind of, rather than pick one thing to read, I picked five or six really short bits, and I had a little talk that I would do, and I interspersed. So I was able to choose different bits, because you're right. I mean, novels are big, complicated things, and they're actually resistant to that kind of reductive approach of sort of, well, I'm going to read for 5 minutes and really
Yeah.
give you a sense of it, because you can't. So every time that you see an author reading, you should know just inside they're weeping silently, because you can't actually do that. But you have to.
Yeah.
So it's hard to do. But that was, and and some people to choose a different bit every time, but I don't. I always tend to read the same bit, because that way it's one less thing for me to worry about.
Right.
But when we do events at the shop, we always warn people ahead of time that we're going to ask them to read, because if you put them on the spot, they look a little bit like deer in headlights. And it's like,
Yeah.
wait, you want me to do what now? It's like,
How am I gonna get in this way? Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
And
So,
they want to, make sure they represent it in the best light. So yeah, I completely
right.
understand. Well, and I'm so glad that you talked about all the behind the scenes with covers and with audiobooks, because that's kind of been one of the things I love lately, is finding out all the minutia and background details on like the books covers and the audiobooks. And like the newest thing that I'm curious about, now that we're learning more about covers and audiobooks, do you, or do authors in general, have any input on the style and type of font and the paper type? And the reason why I say that is, examples. I read The Huntress by Kate Quinn, and
Hmm.
the edges of the pages
Oh yeah.
in the book were like this torn, frayed pages, and they were like this thin, fragile quality. And I loved it. And I met her at a luncheon here in Indianapolis and asked her about it. And she knew immediately what I was talking about. She called it something. Of course, I can't remember what she
Deckle
called it.
edge.
What's it called?
Deckle edge.
Nickel Edge. Oh, loved it.
Deckle. Yeah. So
Loved
so I sent those galleys off to you on Thursday,
it. Okay.
and when you get them, the
Are they
galley,
nickel edged?
they're deckled edge. Yeah. And they've got these things called French flaps on them as well, which the Paris hours, I guess they thought
How
that
could
would
you
do it.
not, right?
Yeah. So yeah, the deckle edge thing is funny, and so they put them on for me on the galley, but not on the final version.
So wait,
Uh,
did you have input, or they decided?
they just told me they were going to do it, and
Okay.
and they sent me the cover art, and because it's not just the front and the back, there's the insides, and
Right.
so the way that it tends to work, and obviously every author is different, and
Right.
I'm sure there are certain people, like if you're Stephen King, you don't do anything. They don't do anything without checking with you first.
Right. You
Uh,
say everything.
Right. Whereas if you're someone like me, it's kind of they sort of go, "Hey, this is what we're going to do." They just tell you rather than ask permission. But but they're also incredibly receptive, and if they had done something that I hated, I'm sure I could have gone, I don't like this.
Yeah.
So they send proofs of the internal pages, kind of like what I mentioned before with the Eiffel Towers,
Right.
and so I was able to see the font that they'd used and how they lay it out. So, for example, with the chapter titles and things, I've never done a novel with chapter titles before, and so I was curious to see how they did it, and they did it beautifully, and I didn't need to change a thing. But had I wanted to, I could have done that. I could have said, "Can we have a different font, or can we,
Right. It's more
can we
like you
make
don't
this work?"
request, you kind of see what they come up with, but then if it's something that really does not speak to you with the book, then you kind of
Right.
intervene at
And
that
so,
point.
and so, so what, one good example of that actually, Aaron, would be the table of contents in the Paris Hours, which the first set of page proofs that came back to me, it was just one, two, three, four, they just went down like this. And I said it would be very helpful if we can block them in blocks of four.
Because of the way you did the
Right. So that gives the reader a visual cue that the story goes in these cycles. So little things like that, and yeah, and they said absolutely we can do that. So there is that ability to have that feedback. But my view generally is that there are people whose job it is to
right,
make these
right.
decisions. They have far better taste and visual acumen than I do, so I tend to just let them do their job. And it's only if I see something that I particularly want, like that thing with the chapters and having
Yeah.
it in a particular way. Otherwise, I let them do their
Because I
work. And
feel like
they're
they're like
wonderful.
particular things that like you don't notice them unless they're like really pleasing and bold, or they're like really poor and non-existent. Like I feel like you said, if they're pleasing and nice, like it just seems to happen. And it's only if it's to one end of the spectrum or other that you might notice some of these particular details. Like if the
Yeah,
font like just distracts you from the story because of the way the font looks, or
yeah,
so on and so forth. So or like for example, I read this book recently, Bibliophile, and it was this big, thick, hefty book. And when you open the book, just this that smell, like that really famous, familiar book smell. I mean, it was just
mhm,
permeating through the pages, and the pages were like nice and thick. And it's like some of those things where I might not normally notice those things, but when they're like that, it just, and I think that a lot of people probably say, well, don't judge a book by its cover, and all these little details and things. But I feel like all these little, like you said, with these experts, all these little details together can really improve the shelf appeal of a book and
yeah.
enhance the reader's opinion of the book, their experience, the reader's experience. And it's kind of like the package to the story. So,
Absolutely, and there are things like just the weight of the paper. I mean, there,
yeah,
in the shop, we handle so many books every day, and every so often you'll get one that's just twice as heavy. It's
yeah,
so strange. And somebody somewhere said we need to do this on a different weight of paper.
right.
Okay,
All these little
it's so
details.
interesting. Yeah, yeah,
So, as I mentioned in my review, your book was my book club's fall selection. My book club's called the Lit Ladies, so shout out to the Lit Ladies. But your book was our fall book club selection, and I don't know, but I'm assuming, I would guess that your book has been one of the most popular book club selections this year. It seems to me. And so I kind of came up with a book club suggestion kit to kind of that I posted on my review that kind of helps enhance the book club experience and the
mm,
reader's experience. And it was kind of inspired by all the ones I've kind of seen recently done by amazing authors like Chanel Cleaton and Signe Pike. just these amazing kind of book club kits overall. So being that we have the author here with us, who else knows this character and book better than you, I thought maybe we could kind of go through those categories and kind of see what you would have selected, because there's probably many more people who are going to still have book club nights with Alex
Mm-hmm.
George's Paris hours. And so let's give them suggestions to just make it the best, most fabulous book club night with your book. So for a movie, I picked Midnight in Paris, just obviously because of the cameos of like Hemingway and things like that, because
Right.
kind of your book. But what would you pick for the movie?
You're going to spring this on me
I'm gonna
now?
spring it on you.
Okay. I would pick a French film which is called Un cœur en hiver.
Okay, what's
Uh,
that mean in English?
that means a heart in winter.
Okay.
And it is a beautiful movie. It stars Emmanuelle Béart, who is one of my favorite French actresses.
Wow.
And it's set in Paris. And it actually, yeah, I'm rather pleased with this answer because I didn't know it was coming. But here, it actually, so Emmanuel Béat is a violinist, and the whole plot of the movie, there isn't much of a plot, but it's about recording the Ravel piano trio.
And you just came out with that.
No, honestly, I promise. Yes, I really did.
That is like the perfect movie.
Well, thank you. Anyway, so that would be what I would choose, and and
That
actually, that
movie's so
movie was
important.
yeah, and but that movie was what introduced me to the Ravel Piano Trio, which is my favorite piece
Oh,
of music of all time, and the third movement of that, which is what we keep coming back to in the
yep.
book. Just played on a piano though, not played as a trio. So that would be my suggestion. So you've got Paris and you've got Ravel.
That perfect. Okay, so food for the evening.
Okay,
Um,
now I'm going to bomb after this. After that
I picked
inspired us.
I picked steak frites
Yeah,
with a baguette and a French red and oysters and champagne, based on some of the things the characters said in the book, and the setting. And interesting enough, you posted that Valet Mag came up with a cocktail that goes with the book,
yeah,
Gibson Cocktail Martini.
yeah.
So what would you pick for either a drink or food, or something with the book club night?
Well, I mean, I think you've actually hit the nail on the proverbial head with the steak fruit. I mean,
I know, right?
when I go to Paris, it drives my wife crazy. But what I like to do is to not go to the fancy schmancy
Yeah.
restaurants, but go to the little corner bistros that are on every corner and just have whatever's on the menu that night. And they
Yeah.
are unpretentious, wonderful food, very good value, and just it's really French and really it's just wonderful. And invariably, I will have steak frites. So that was kind of very very rare.
Yeah.
So that would actually probably be what I would say. But I mean, maybe a croque monsieur, which
Oh, that's true. Yes, you're true.
which would be good. And then if I had to choose a drink, I would actually say a very small cup of very strong espresso,
Oh, yeah.
which when I lived in Paris, I while I was there, that was when I developed what I suspect is a clinical addiction to coffee. And I have an espresso ever since when I came back. I've had an espresso machine in
This
my
is when
house.
you worked as an attorney there?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yeah. And I get up at 5 every morning to write, and I couldn't do it if I didn't have my coffee. So yeah, very,
It's funny you
very.
said that. I was going to ask you that about your writing process, that how you get up at 5. What is your caffeinated beverage of choice to kind of like get through the day and wake up? So it's like just straight espresso is your.
Yes, yes, very strong. You can like stand a spoon up in it. So yeah.
Yeah. And then what about for music? Obviously, I that's kind of a popular thing now, is this curated Spotify playlist.
Hmm.
So I kind of, obviously for obvious reasons, picked like George Gershwin, Louis
Hmm.
Armstrong, Sidney Bechet, Pavel, all that kind of, what would you?
Yeah, you know, all of those are wonderful choices, and also Josephine Baker sang as well.
Yeah, just
Um,
oh, she's on the
uh,
list.
and so she J'ai deux amours, which was a very famous song of hers. And I always, I think of Sidney Bechet, and there's a particular recording of his, a Blue Note recording, and he recorded "Summertime." This is about a little later than when we in 1927. It's in the early 30s. And that was my first introduction to jazz when I was about 11. I stole a record from my father's record collection. It really dates me, doesn't it? We had records. Um, and so I've loved him ever since. So he would be an obvious one. Ravel, of course. I think the other thing that another direction you might take it would be um, and it's an old cliche, but they're cliches for a reason.
Right.
An accordionist.
Oh yeah. The
You know,
whole French cafe thing.
yeah, and
Yeah.
they still appear on the metro, and they'll playing
Yeah.
their squeeze boxes, and so that would be another route to go.
Yeah.
But I think you got the main one.
Well, and then I also thought, if you looked at some art online, looking at paintings by Picasso and Seurat and Renoir
Mhm,
and
mhm.
Degas on the Cirque Madrano, just because
Yes,
of the
yes,
importance of that in the book.
right.
So I didn't know if there was any other art pieces that might be inspired from some of the scenes in the book, or um,
So a lot of people have asked me. So there is a painting in the book. Guillaume, the artist, paints a picture. Then
oh, that yeah, that was.
uh,
I don't want to give anything away because it's just
no,
so
it was
interesting
weird.
what he painted and how it connected everybody.
So the painting has a kind of a life of its own, and he he sort of loses possession of it. I'm trying to sort of not give anything away,
Yeah.
and then it goes on through the book, and we see it later on in various places. And there's a whole story behind which we learn about how the painting was made, and the circumstances when he painted it, and what sort of painting of. And it turns out that the thing that he was looking at when he was painting it isn't the same as what he actually painted. But and people have asked me about that, and they were sort of going, "What were you doing?" And I said, "I don't know, I just making it up." So there's another artist who I sort of had in my head when I was describing the painting, and he was called Rousseau. I think his first name was Henri Rousseau, who was known as Le Douanier. And he painted these sort of hyper realistic, always very dark paintings. There's a very famous one with a tiger walking through a jungle. And so he would be somebody in terms of the art, Le Douanier, Rousseau.
Is he contemporary or is
No,
he
he was, oh gosh, I think round about the time that we're talking was
okay?
probably when he was painting.
So it would be even more perfect.
Yeah, yeah, I'm not
Yeah.
quite sure about that, but he's not contemporary for sure.
And then probably typically even before they started coming out with these big book club kits, there's always been, even in the simplest kit, kind of discussion questions at the end of books to kind of spark conversation for book clubs and
Hmm.
further book reflection. And so in my review I attached the Macmillan publishing reading group guide questions, but I was curious if what's the question you've been asked the most by book clubs, or have you got to participate virtually in kind of any book club events?
Um, I have. I'm doing more. So in the lifetime of a book, when the book comes out, the book, as you said, the book came out in May, and obviously those initial um, events that I did, people hadn't read the book yet.
Yeah.
And so you have to have these weird conversations like the one we've had about,
Right.
well, then this thing happens and we're not going to talk about, but and so that's one life, and then there's this other life which is kind of more fun, really, which is the book club life, where people have read the book and they all come with questions, and a lot of people want to talk about the ending,
Yeah, of
uh,
course.
and and some like some people love it and some people don't love it, and some people like their stories tied up with a bow, and
Right.
other people don't. But I love those conversations because people do, as I said at the beginning, everyone brings something different to it. One of the most interesting questions that I got during the book clubs that I've done, and it was very perceptive, and it was about Soren, and we haven't really spoken about Soren at all
Oh, that is
in this.
coming.
Oh, okay. So Soren is this Armenian who's in Paris, and someone said, so I was interested that you included one of the main characters in the story wasn't French, and then they said, and is that because you're an immigrant and that you live in the States but you're English, and that you're thinking about being a stranger in a strange land, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
And the answer was, well, I hadn't thought about it expressly, but that's almost certainly true.
Yeah.
So,
You're like, wait, that's deep, but I think I'm back there thinking.
yeah. So, when and often people say, well, why did you do this and why did you do that? And I'm sure it's very frustrating, but I don't always have a neat answer for those things. And sometimes it's just like, I don't know. It seemed like
Right.
a good idea. I like that painting. I still have no idea where that painting came from. It just sort of came out of my head.
Yeah.
And so there isn't always an answer, but sometimes the answer reveals itself later on, and that was, I thought, very smart. And my book, A Good American, was very expressly and specifically about immigration. It told the story of a family coming from Germany and coming to the States. And I wrote it because I had 2 years previously done the same thing. I
Yeah.
came to the States in 2003. So it was kind of on my mind. But what was interesting was somebody pointing out that apparently it's still on my mind. Yeah,
Right.
even though
Subconsciously, you're still thinking about it.
yeah. So that was really interesting.
So you just brought up Soren, and I definitely wanted to talk about him. And it's funny how in some of the virtual chats I have watched, he I don't know if you felt this way, but it seems to be the character the most people ask about or bring up
Yeah.
if they're gonna bring up about a character. And so for people who haven't watched the virtual chats, you had kind of said that you hadn't known a lot about the Armenian genocide until one of your Armenian friends had kind of told you stories about his family and
Hmm.
ancestors escaping and surviving the genocide. And so, what's wonderful is not only did these stories provide the inspiration for this character, but you brought a whole new awareness and knowledge and showed a light on an event that a lot of people might not have known about. And ironically enough, I learned the most about it from a book as well. It was The Sandcastle Girls by Chris
Oh
Bojanlan.
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
I wanted to ask if you had read that book, and I was the same as you. I don't feel like they teach that a lot about that in schools or in history. And like I remember reading that book and being like cracked wide open and being like what? And they still don't recognize it to this day. And it was just like it kind of speaks to the beautiful power of historical fiction
Mm.
to shine a light and create awareness on unknown or little talked about scandals or historical events or heroes or whatnot. So I don't know if you want to talk about that, but I just think that it's just that's why I think historical fiction is one of my favorite genres because it can crack you open like that to
Yeah,
these. Um, so yeah, so if you want to,
yeah. I mean, it's you're right. You talk about shining a light, and that's exactly right. It was and my friend who talked to me about it told me about it 20 years ago, at least, and I remember just thinking, why don't I know more about it? Why isn't this a
yeah,
bigger deal? But I always say that novelists are like magpies, and we're always on the lookout for shiny things. And when we see them, we put them in our pockets, and then you never know whether you're going to use it next week or in 20 years' time. But I always wanted to write about that. And but you also, by the same token, don't want to shoehorn such a thing into the wrong book. So I was
right,
just waiting for the right book, and then when I made the decision to write about Paris in more of the time thing in 1927, it was like, this I can finally do this thing
yeah,
and tell this story
right.
and introduce him into that narrative. So that was fun, and but it's also um, it's very important when you do this and this goes back really to what we were saying before about that spectrum of with historical fiction, about where you fall on that spectrum, particularly something horrific like this episode, which was truly just apocalyptically bad, and is that you need to honor the story and the people who lived that story, and not just use it for your
Yeah.
you know, fictional ends. And everybody I know does that. They treat the stories that they use with the utmost respect. I certainly try and do my best to do that. And it's a challenge, because you want to you want to shine that light, and in order to do that effectively, you have to tell the truth, but you also have a story to tell. And so there's always this balance, not quite a tension, but it's a balance
Yes.
between those things. And yeah, I hope I've managed to do the story justice.
Well, and I was kind of excited thinking that um, that there might be readers out there who your book does what the Sandcastle Girls did for me years ago, where that's how I found out more about the, like you said, the breadth of the Armenian genocide. And now your book might be doing that for readers everywhere now.
I
So
hope so. I mean, and a lot of people said, "Oh, I didn't know anything about this," and so I hope that's right. And I also know that there are people who picked the book up because they saw in the blurb that there was this Armenian puppeteer, and it was like, "Those are my people." And so,
right.
it's not something that is much written about. So, we'll see. But yes, it would be lovely to think that maybe I have this very small soapbox, but maybe I've used it to some good, and maybe helped a few more people learn about this terrible thing.
I think so. So you mentioned before that you published several books in England, and before you moved to the States and published several books here. How is it different publishing books in England versus publishing books here?
Well, I mean, it's an entirely different experience, and much, all for the better, when it comes to being in the
Interesting.
States. But that speaks, I think, more to my career path than anything else. I was very fortunate to be published when I was, because I was working full time as this corporate attorney. And had I not been published, I probably would have thought, oh well, that was fun. Never mind, I'll just go on and be a lawyer then.
Right.
Um, but I did get published, and so, but I kind of feel as if I almost did my apprenticeship in public, because those early books, they are not very good. Um, people sometimes write to me and say, "Oh, where can I get them?" And I say, "Really, don't. Just do yourself a favor and don't bother." Um, so, and as a result of that, they were what we call very much mid-list titles. They were all published by HarperCollins. I mean, they were published throughout Europe and in various translations and things, which was nice. But um, they were published by the HarperCollins, big publisher, but they were very much, you know, down the pecking order, and so didn't receive a huge amount of attention from the publisher, and not much, and so therefore they just were published, and not much happened.
Yeah.
Which is entirely what they deserve, to be honest with you. But when I came to the States, it was just entirely different. I've been unbelievably fortunate to have incredible support from both of the houses who have published me. They sent me on book tours, which is not a given. And Amy Einhorn, my editor, was just an incredible champion for her authors, and um, it was just wonderful. And I feel incredibly lucky to be published by two wonderful houses, and it's been like night and day. Uh,
Oh,
but I don't think that doesn't necessarily mean that American publishers are much better than English
right.
publishers. They were just different beasts,
Completely different.
different books. Yeah, I really feel that when I moved to the States, I didn't publish a book for quite a long time, because it took me a long time to write a good American, and it felt like it was like a a career restart.
Yeah. And
Which
it's
is why I
always
don't talk about that. If you go to my website, you won't see those first four books.
Really?
We don't talk about them anymore.
Well, and it's always interesting to see like the different covers of books and from different countries and things. So it's always been interesting to me, how, like you said, whether it's the cover, whether it's marketing, like how
Yeah,
they view different audiences in different countries. This country might, you need to promote it more this way, and the cover needs to look more that way. And so I just was curious as to, since you've been in both worlds, the
yeah.
difference kind of in publishing a book in both places.
Yeah, no, it is interesting, and the covers are different. I mean, somebody one day will write some very clever thesis about covers in different
The
jurisdictions,
psychology.
yeah, why they're all different. Um, I mean, we've sold the Paris hours all over the place in all sorts of weird, weird countries. The only cover I've seen has been in Germany, and they're actually, rather to my disappointment, they're using the same cover as they used
Oh,
in
it's so good. You have
America.
to. They can't top it.
Well, it is good, but part of the fun is seeing the different covers.
Seeing it
But
reimagined.
we sold it it's being translated into Farsi, which I think is, I guess, Iran,
That's
and
so
then
cool.
the Ukraine, and where else? Weird places.
But that's like a whole
All
nother
the-
topic of like translation, like how does
yeah.
sometimes the meaning gets changed in translation and all. That's a whole nother
Oh,
rabbit hole.
for sure. Yeah. And my first few books were sold in France, and The Good American was sold in France. And I speak French, and so I read them. And certainly with the first book, the guy who translated it took enormous liberties with the text, and changed names and added
No
footnotes, and
way.
yeah, it was wild.
And
It
is
was
that something
crazy.
that you don't even know or have any control, and it just is.
Well, I mean, I speak French, so I was able to look at it, but who knows what they do with these? I mean, I'll be honest with you, Aaron, my Ukrainian is very rusty. Um,
You're like, I'm multilingual, but I don't go that far.
yeah,
Well, and I also want to talk about, you've talked about the many hats that you wear. We've talked about the attorney hat, the bookshop hat, the bookseller hat, and then this founder and director of the Unbound Book Festival. So I wanted to ask you, what made you as an author decide to own a bookshop and become a bookseller and kind of start a book festival? Because even though it might seem like the perfect marriage and union, that they would only improve upon each other's success and outcomes, you belong to kind of a select group of authors turned bookshop owners.
yeah.
Some of those include, off the top of my head, like Emma Straub and Ann Patchett, Judy Bloom, Nora Roberts, um,
Mhm.
Etop Rum, and all of that. So I was just curious as to what kind of made that decision, and how do all those different hats play in these different roles? How do they improve or the success? And
Right. So the way that it happened was, there's a fairly clear timeline. So when I was on tour for A Good American, I attended various book festivals all over the country, and I thought, oh, this is fun. And then I thought, Columbia, Missouri it's a college town. There are three universities here, including the University of Missouri, and we have lots and lots of festivals. There's a world famous documentary film festival called True False that takes place here, and we have music festivals and all these different things. And I thought, well, we need a book festival, and there wasn't one.
oh
And
wow,
and so I sort of came home and said to people, "What do you? We should do this, shouldn't we?" And we had no idea what we were getting into. I always say that the biggest weapon I had in my armory was a really sort of profound ignorance of what was involved.
ignorance is bliss.
Because had I had any idea how much
You
work it
would.
would have, I would have run 100 miles in the other direction. But there you are. And so we sort of began planning this thing, and we did four of them, and then we were going to have, this April would have been our fifth, but of course that was cancelled. But it's been incredible. We had Michael Ondaatje who came, and Salman Rushdie, Zadie Smith, and then last year, 2019 was George Saunders who came. And so we have about 70 authors who come from across the country. They fly in. It's totally free for people to come to. But it's an unbelievable amount of work. Anyway, so that was how that happened. And then the response of the community here in Colombia was just incredible. It was overwhelming, and people loved it. And we don't actually have, or we didn't actually have, an independent bookstore in Colombia that sold new books. So we've got a
Wow.
wonderful, our neighbor just 3 doors down from us is called Yellow Dog bookshop, and Joe there, but he's like 95% used books. So there isn't a new bookstore. And I just thought, well, apparently I wasn't busy enough. And so I thought,
Yeah.
well, people love this. And so, but it was the response of the community to the festival that made me think that we could do the bookstore. And having been on tour for my last two books, for A Good American and Sending for You the Kites, and I've been to lots and lots of bookstores. I adore independent bookstores, of course. And so I just thought, well, okay, let's do that. And I made the very smart decision of talking to my business partner Kerry, who actually knows what she's doing, and so she is very much the brains behind the operation.
You're like,
And
I'm the face.
well, kind of a little bit. I don't know what I am, but I'm certainly not the brains. So some other part of the mouth, probably. I'm the mouth. Um, but it has been amazing, and we have so much fun, and I have just loved every second of it. Now, our doors have been closed since the middle of March, so more than half of our lifetime, sorry, more than a quarter of our lifetime, we've been closed because we just had our second birthday. And it's really hard. Independent bookstores across the country are really hurting and suffering enormously. We're doing everything we can to make it work. And can I do a quick plug?
Oh, of course. I was gonna ask you at the end, how can our viewers out there support Skylark Bookshop and independent bookstores? I know that we just had Happy Independent Bookstore Day, but now that that's
Right,
passed, what are
right,
some ways that our viewers can support indie bookstores right now? Because you guys are trying to pivot so many different ways
right.
to try to continue to function when you either can't be open due to safety, or you have this huge online sales that maybe that wasn't normally what the bookstore experience was. So how
Right.
can viewers support Skylark and other?
Well, I mean, any independent bookstore will, just please buy your books from an independent bookstore, whether it's a local one to you, or whether they're not local. I mean, we have shipped books to all 50 states. And it's weird the way that we transitioned from being sending out maybe one book a week to becoming a 100% mail order business. It was just wild, and totally unexpected. But yes, we pivoted and we made it work. So skylarkbookshop.com is the website. We actually don't do online. I'm working on that at the moment, but we don't have an online e-commerce thing, and I did that on purpose, because the whole point about independent
Yeah.
books is that the value of them is to actually talk to the booksellers. And so we have, so people call and they email, and we even give advice on over email, and someone will say, well, I really liked X, what else do you suggest? And we'll write back and say, well, try Y and Z.
Yeah.
And then we'll sort of take payment over the phone and then ship it out. So we're always happy to do that. But I wanted in particular to mention, I mentioned Christina before. So we do this thing. One of the things that we're trying to do is these virtual events, and we do. They tend to be on Thursdays. The next couple of weeks, we're doing one on Wednesday and one on Thursday. But we've had some unbelievable authors come through. What is it, Saturday? So 2 days ago, Natalie Jenner, who wrote the Jane Austen Society, was
Yeah,
with
that's
with
huge.
us. And we've had these great authors come through. And so if people aren't doing anything on a Thursday night, you can come and tune in. It's all totally free, of course. But yeah,
And
you
this is
go.
on the Skylark Bookshop Facebook page.
It's on the Facebook page. There's also, if you go to scarletbookshop.com and go to the events page, there's a Zoom link, and you can
Oh,
go
okay.
into
Either
Zoom and
way.
watch it there as well. But yeah, we'd love to have people come and check us out. I mean, the thing about all of this online stuff, of course, is that it's not as good as being there in person, but it does open doors. I mean, you're in Indiana, you're 2 states away, but
Yeah.
here we are talking,
Right.
and it actually allows, has allowed me since May to. I mean, I did an event in Southern California one day, and then I was in Providence, in Massachusetts, the next day.
Traveled across country in like 2 days.
Yeah, just in my pajamas. Didn't have to. So it's actually. I mean, we're all in the business of looking for silver linings these days, and one of them for writers has been this explosion of online activity, which allows us to talk to more people, even though it's not quite the same as being there in person and sort of being able to have conversations on one with our readers. But it's the next best thing.
What is the time that though? Is it the same time every Thursday?
Yeah, it's 7 o'clock. The time is always the same. We do occasionally do things on Wednesdays,
Okay.
just otherwise it would be too easy.
7
But
Central Standard.
7 Central, yes. Yeah.
Okay. Any other ways that they can support Skylark Writer?
I mean, just give us a call and order a book from
Yeah.
us. We'll ship anywhere. We're doing reduced shipping rates. Okay, this has turned into too much of a commercial, but
Well, we want to support you. Well, the other one I was going to ask you about, how do we support the Paris hours? Because a lot of times some of these virtual chats and events all come kind of prior to the release to kind of promote the release and create a buzz, or like right when the book is released. And being that it's been some months out, how are some different ways that maybe, it's a little different since it hasn't just been released. So what can we do now that it's been out for a while to help continue to kind of push its propulsion and whatnot?
I mean, talk about it with your. If you
Yeah.
liked it, if you didn't like it, that's a
Yeah.
word. If you enjoyed it,
You don't have
please.
anything nice
I
to say,
mean,
don't say anything at all, just like your mama told you.
right, exactly. But yeah, I mean, tell your friends about it.
Yeah.
Share on Instagram and all that good stuff. And I love. I mean, one of the really fun things about this book was that it was chosen as a Book of the Month Club selection, and which was huge, and for us, and the people who do Book of the Month, or a lot of the people who do Book of the Month, love Instagram, and so it was really fun to
To
watch.
see it in all these people's hands.
Yeah, and people, and they take the book and they pose it in these incredibly elaborate and beautiful ways, and that was super fun just to watch that. So yeah, post a picture on Instagram if you liked it. I mean, I leave a review on Goodreads or that other place that there's some other
Yeah,
online.
some other.
So anything like that is all to the good. So anything would be wonderful.
So for your birthday or Christmas present, somebody needs to make you like a big framed print of all these beautiful Instagram pics of my Paris hours. And so you can have a print on the wall of seeing your book in all these different places and crazy places, and the reach that it has made. Because like you said, it probably is so fun to see that.
It is fun for sure. Yeah.
So I'll have one more thing. I know I've kept you way over. It's just too much fun. But one more thing I wanted to talk about. I wanted to see if we could just do a couple quick, light and fun questions so that we can get to know Alex George beyond like British writer who owns a bookshop in Missouri.
Okay.
So just real off the cuff questions. From one soccer player to another. I know you play in a soccer league and you're an Arsenal fan.
Yes.
What is your preferred position to play in soccer?
I'm a defender.
That's me too.
And I'm a defender because I'm really not very good.
Ah,
And so I'm much
I
better.
would argue as a defender that we are the most important. We are the last line of defense, the last stopper and sweeper to stop the goal.
Well, that's all true, but but I'm better at sort of getting in the way than actually using any kind of skill. So I just defend and then hack it out. So that's what I do.
So defender.
Yeah.
um, We were kind of talked a little bit before about the Unbound Book Festival. When do you pick the selections for the festival? And if you could, like right now, pick who you would have for 2021, what would be some authors on the short list?
Well, that's a long and complicated answer because we have a committee who does this. We've already got our keynote event. I mean, everything this next coming up year is going to be online, unfortunately. But and our keynote is Tracy Smith, the poet, and she's actually going to be in conversation with Jericho Brown, who is another poet, and they have both won Pulitzers.
Wow.
So we're kind of, and Jericho Brown just won one for his most recent
You're like
collection.
double Pulitzer.
Yeah, so we're kind of pretty pleased about that, and we're excited about it. And we every year I mean, choosing the authors is the biggest and most important job that we have. And for example, so this coming up year is Missouri's bicentennial. So
Oh,
we're going to be more focused on Missouri writers for that.
that's
But
fair.
we try and have just a broad, eclectic and diverse selection of authors and also topics and those sorts of things. So it's a really long and complicated process, but fun though. Fun too.
Yeah. Well, and I think sometimes a lot of it too, it seems that sometimes the festivals time up like right after a book has been released and they're like, it's just starting to surge in like bestseller. And I'm always like, how did they? Because I'm sure I was like, I know they've had to pick these like way in advance.
Yeah,
And so they somehow have had the insight and foresight to like be able to pick, they know what's going to be hot or like, or can just sense what's going to be just like this breakthrough debut. And I just
yeah,
always have found that amazing that you guys
yeah.
have been able to kind of,
Well, it's certainly easier to do that owning a bookshop because
right.
you get early access to, and you just hear about titles way before they come out or anyone else has heard about them. So that's been helpful for sure.
And then you talked about how, obviously you're from Britain, but live now in the States. What are some of the favorite places that you've traveled to in the States since you've lived here? And would you ever move now that you have this brick and mortar bookshop in Missouri?
Oh yeah, that's a good question and one we talk about. Oh, I don't know if we'll ever move. I mean, my wife was born and raised in New York, and she's a professor at the University of Missouri. Excuse me, and we talk about these years as the Missouri years. But yeah, we have four children, and they're all in school. My son's at college, but so we're not going anywhere anytime soon. Um, I mean, I've traveled all over the place for the book.
Right.
When I travel for fun, I tend to go back to England or Europe. But my favorite place in the States is Maine.
Oh, it's yeah.
And
I feel like it's one of the most undiscovered gems. Maine and Oregon, I've always said, are like the two most undiscovered gems that you
right,
don't hear a lot of as much about as some of the others, but you go and it's
right.
knocks
Yeah,
you
it's
over.
beautiful. And Setting Free the Kites, my last book before this one was set in Maine. And partly
How
because
convenient.
yeah, well, so these magic
Gotta
words,
go do research.
tax deductible. Um, so yeah, but
What
so
is
I
your
mean,
favorite places and like what's your favorite? Do you go revisit the same place in Maine or
we tend to move around. My wife went to college there, so she knows it far better than I do. But we tend to move around. We stay sort of southish. We have very good friends who live in Portland, so we tend to stay around there. But we will go up the coast and get an Airbnb,
yeah,
and then that sort of thing. So, but we move around a little bit just to try different places. But
that's awesome.
this is the first year that we haven't gone to Maine for years and years and
You're
years.
like, it Maine's calling me.
Yeah, completely. Yeah, no, absolutely.
So,
It's
so
great to
I'm
have.
guessing the first chance you have to go on a vacation, it's either home or Maine.
Oh, it'll be home.
Yeah,
It'll
that's
be
true.
home. Yeah.
So, we talked earlier about kind of like books turn into movies and movies turn into books, whatnot. Do you have any favorite movies or shows that you watch that are based on books? There just seems to be a rash of shows, especially right now. And of course, there's always kind of the books turned movie.
Yeah, I don't know. None that spring to mind, to be honest. I mean, obviously I would say this, but the book's always better.
Of course.
Um, so there isn't one that springs to mind that I know came from a book. And I haven't discovered any books by seeing a movie and then
Right.
going, oh, well,
Going back.
So yeah, I'm sorry, I've not none that spring to mind.
Do you even have a lot of time to watch like movies and
No,
TV shows,
no,
considering
we
you
actually,
probably have stacks of like ARCs you need to review and books for your bookshop and
we watch very little television, and we actually don't have TV coming into our house. We don't have cable or anything. We just have an internet connection. So we've actually just started watching. Oh well, what? So here we are. Here's Game of Thrones.
oh, there you
I
go.
didn't even think that. Yeah, of course. So
So you're
we've just
starting
started.
the Game of Thrones of addiction.
Yeah, I mean, we sort of, we go through phases of watching particular things. Then you get to the end, and you go, well, now what are we going to do? But we actually watch very very little TV. Because yeah, we're just busy, 4 kids and the pandemic and all these things.
Right.
There's just a lot to do. So, but when we do, that's what we watch.
And so do you have a favorite a book favorite like kind of Paris book or movie besides the one you recommended for the book club? Because I
Oh, I
know
mean,
there's just a lot of, like you said, kind of books right now out there with, especially Paris in general. I don't know if it's the pandemic, but it just seems like there's a lot of travel books out there right
yeah,
now.
and I'm actually doing an event in October with 3 other authors, all of whom have written novels set in Paris.
Who? Who are you? Like all new books? All new books?
No, not all new, but
Oh, okay.
there are so many, so many. So a book that I love about Paris is called Paris in the Present Tense, and I can picture it for the life of me. I can't remember the name of the author, but Paris in the Present Tense is wonderful. And one of the reasons I like it is that, kind of like what I was trying to do with my book, it doesn't talk about the Paris that we know,
Yeah.
and it's about some of the lesser known places. And I really, it wasn't the book I was expecting it to be, but I really enjoyed it. Oh, the
Well,
cat's
oh, is that Hank again?
yeah.
Hank's like, come on. Well, I'm going to wrap it up because, like I said, we appreciate all the time that you've given us on this Labor Day weekend. And I just want to remind everybody to like, love, comment, share this post so that you can have a chance to win one of these beautiful galleys that Alex has so bequeathed us. And if you love Paris Hours, shout it out, and we'll tune into Erudite Bibliophile with Wanderlust for more posts regarding Alex George and the Paris Hours. Thank you, Alex.
You're very welcome. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you.
Bye.